Welcome everyone to the 22nd Annual Rutgers Jewish Film Festival. I'm Karen Small, I'm the director of the festival, and I actually wish I could see you all tonight, but here we are back on Zoom and presenting our festival again this year, but in a slightly different format. And I'm going to speak about that in just a couple of minutes. I'd like to thank our sponsors who make this festival possible for Rutgers to offer to the community. Our lead sponsor, Sharon Karmazin and the Karma Foundation. We couldn't do it without you. We appreciate all of your help and all of your support over all of these years, 22 years, as a matter of fact. So thank you to Sharon and to the Karma Foundation. This year, our film sponsors, Marcel and Hannah Rosenzweig. Thank you very much. We appreciate your support. And David and Sylvia Steiner, who have an endowed film program with us. We appreciate very much your support of us from the beginning as well. All of our patrons have come back this year to a virtual festival. We had a chance to see each other last Sunday in person, which was just amazing to be on campus and have all of you here. And we really appreciate you coming out. I'd now like to take a minute to introduce a special guest, the Executive Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences here at Rutgers University and Distinguished Professor of Mathematics, Professor Peter March, who'll share a few words with us.
Well, thank you, Karen, and welcome everyone. I'm just so glad to be back at the annual Rutgers Jewish Film Festival. This is the Bildner Center's largest and most visible public event, and one awaited so eagerly by the community. This is such an important communal gathering, and it follows a very special event that took place on campus in New Brunswick on Friday, which was the inauguration of the Rutgers 21st University President, Jonathan Scott Holloway. President Holloway's inauguration took place more than a year after he joined Rutgers due to the COVID-19 pandemic, sort of like starting all over again, right? The two-day celebration included a virtual academic panel discussion on the value of public service, moderated by President Holloway. And that event kicks off a year-long series of events highlighting excellence across the university. I'm grateful that the festival has continued to reach so many people through a virtual format, keeping them connected to Rutgers and to the Bildner Center at a time when so many of us were isolated at home for such a long time. And this year, just as the students and faculty have returned to campus, the festival returns to in-person screenings to help us get back to normal. The film selections this year have a particular emphasis on diversity and inclusion, themes that illustrate the Bildner Center's commitment to Rutgers' mission and its new initiatives under President Holloway. The films engage issues of ethnic conflict and resolution, the frailty of memory, culture, and the power of love across boundaries. Though Jewish in experience, the film expresses universalist themes of the human condition that are just familiar to all of us. So I hope you all enjoy the films and can take advantage of the virtual webinars and talks with the film's directors, writers, and actors beginning tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. We appreciate your support as always and for being with us today. So this year we have put together a hybrid festival. And what does that mean? All of our films are in the virtual cinema. They're all available to you that way. But in addition, through our partnerships with Rutgers Cinema and the Princeton Garden Theater, we have selected 5 films for in-person screenings. So you can get more information about that on the Bildner Center's website. You'll find the film names, the times, the places. Some are free, some have tickets. So take a look there and you'll find the rest of that information. We are thrilled that most films also have a discussion with either the film director or an actor or someone associated with the film. So tonight we're starting with those. You have to sign up for those separately than your film tickets. So please take a look at those as well on our website and you'll get more information. I'd like to take a minute to thank our Festival Advisory Committee, who works very hard to select the films for the festival. And that committee includes Peter Avery, Frankie Bush, Professor Leslie Fishbein, Stephen Gorelick, Sharon Karmazin, Ali Mandel, Marcel Rosenzweig, and Professor Nancy Sinkoff. In addition, we can't have a festival without thanking our staff who work year-round, work very hard on this event. And you wouldn't believe what they do to make this happen. So thank you very much to Sarah Portilla, our program coordinator, Jenny Gurman, who oversees all of our ticket sales, our website, all of our administrative pieces, Darcy Marr, who oversees our communications, and Josh Schwartz, who joined us this year in the office, as well as Gabrielle Duque, who is our digital ticketing assistant. Special thanks also to Steve Gorelick, the executive director of the New Jersey Commission on Television and Film. His team and Steve created a fabulous trailer for our festival, and we're going to take a minute to see that now.
I'm getting a little button that says that who can share, advanced sharing options. It is not allowing me to share my screen. Oh, I now got it. Hold on 1 second. Oops, wait. Now that I have it, threw me for a loop. Here we go.
Thanks, Sarah. So tonight's program is in a webinar format, meaning you can only see the speakers. I guess you figured that out by now. So we will have a chance to take your questions, though, at the end of the program. So if you do have questions, please put them in the chat, and then the moderator will pose the questions to tonight's speaker. So we're going to move on now to the second part of this program, and I'm delighted to introduce Professor Nancy Sinkoff. Nancy is the academic director of the Allen and Joan Bildner Center for the Study of Jewish Life and professor of Jewish Studies and History at Rutgers, New Brunswick. Her most recent book, From Left to Right, Lucy S. Davidovich, The New York Intellectuals and the Politics of Jewish History, was published in March 2020 and won a National Jewish Book Award in the category of biography. So Nancy, I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Thanks so much. Everyone can hear me? So I want to second or third all the welcomes from Dean Peter March and from Karen Small. And Karen is typically modest. Let's be clear, the staff of the Bildner Center works incredibly hard all year on the Rutgers Jewish Film Festival, stewarded by Karen Small, the managing director of the Allen and Joan Bildner Center. And this is the 22nd Rutgers Jewish Film Festival under her baton. So my personal thanks to Karen, and all of our thanks to Karen. She's also on the film advisory committee, as is Sarah Portillo. So really, this is a collaborative effort, but it takes the direction and the insight and the intelligence and the management skills that Karen has. So thank you so much, because once again, we have an incredible lineup of films and of speakers, and none of this could happen without her leadership and guidance. I get the great pleasure of interviewing Arye Sharuz Shalicar, whose memoir, Wet Dog, is the basis of the film Wet Dog. And I have something more to say about the title in a second, but first I want to introduce Arye, who's on screen with us here from Israel. Am I correct? Or I wasn't sure if Israel, Berlin, but either way, it's late wherever you are, I think. So Arye.
Yes, it is. Good evening.
Yeah, so good evening to you. Erev Tov. So Arye Sharuz Shalicar is a German, Persian, Israeli political scientist, journalist, writer, government worker, and someone who has life experiences that made it to film. You've seen the film, so some of you know his trajectory from youthful graffiti artist, talented graffiti artist, and hip hop musician apparently, to a different kind of adult. And we can talk more about that in a second. He now serves as an official spokesperson for the Tzahal, for the Israeli Defense Forces, and holds the rank of major, and he also continues to write. So I'm going to pose a series of questions to you, Arye, and I welcome your expansive comments and anything you want to add to the questions that we miss. And we will also be taking questions from our audience who has streamed and screened your film. So the first thing I want to talk about is what comes up often in a film like this, which is based on a written text, on a memoir in your case. So I would like to ask you, what was that like to see your baby, if you will, your memoir and your memories, very selective, of course, transferred or translated to the screen, which has different requirements? And what was that like for you? What was the process? How involved were you? What fell out? What was added? So just let us know what the adaptation was like. A lot of questions there.
Yeah, thank you for your question. First of all, it is very exciting to not only have your biography out, like your own book about your own story, but also know that there are people out there who think that your book is worth a movie. And, you know, basically, if you write about yourself, these are usually people, you know, 70, 80, 90-year-old looking back at life And the same about movies. But my movie or my book, I wrote it with the age of 21. And so it's kind of in the middle of my life, and it's very exciting. And the feedback I got all over the place, especially in Germany, is very exciting because people watch it and people think about what they see. The movie is different than the book, you obviously know, and some parts of the movie are, to me, a bit hard because, the thing was the pregnancy, for example, at the end of the movie, which part of the movie, but not of the book. It gave me a little headache here at home with my wife. But a part of that, most of the, let's say, most of the movie is not one-to-one, but very close to what the book is like and what my story was like as a teenager growing up as the only Jew amongst the many, many Muslims in Berlin.
So how closely, I mean, I know a little bit about these things with books. If the film rights were sold, you may have been totally out of the picture. Did you work with the writers at all? Did they consult with you? Or did you really just have to say, it's a new genre, it's going to go out in the world in a different form, maybe it will bring people back to the book? Were you involved at all in the adaptation?
Yeah, well, the writer who contacted me about 10 years ago already, when my book got out the first time in 2010-11, I kind of, let's say, accompanied him for a couple of years. Like, he was very interested in my life and what I was going through as a teenager, and he asked me to meet my parents, to meet my best friends, to visit my school, to meet my teacher, to get a feeling of what my life was like, and not only through reading the book, but through meeting the actual people which I mentioned in my book and the places I mentioned in my book. So it was a process, I would say, of a couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years, and I started trusting the writers, and especially Damir, who is behind the movie and the charge of the movie, I would say. And once I started trusting him, I knew that he got a very good sense of what my life was about, and that he will translate it into a movie in an appropriate way.
Well, that's wonderful to feel that you trust. I mean, I think that it's a challenge to let something go like that. So you did already mention that it was very exciting that it's been so well received in Germany. Can you speak a little bit more about the reception? And I'm curious not only among the incredible cosmopolitans in Germany. I mean, Berlin and Germany is still one of the centers of cosmopolitanism, extremely diverse society, a society that certainly its intellectual and artistic class spends a lot of time thinking about the past and a lot of time thinking about issues. But there is a very, very large Muslim population in Germany as well, not only of your childhood, but in many other parts of the country. So can you talk about those two communities, sort of, if you will, the intellectual artistic reception and the degree to which you have heard from, talked with people in the Muslim, from your background, friends, people you knew and know in the Muslim world about the depiction of your past?
Yes, well, just like I would say even New York and Paris and London, Berlin is kind of the same. Some parts of Berlin are very, I would say, multicultural, where you have Germans living side by side in a very, I would say, friendly way with all kind of immigrants from all over the world, and I was one of them as a child growing up in a neighborhood which was like very multicultural, called Spandau. But once I moved with the age of 13 to the neighborhood Wedding, which was called Wedding in German, it was not only a very different kind of atmosphere, because all the young boys and girls looked like me. They were all immigrants, most of them from the Middle East, like Turkish and Kurdish and Palestinian and Lebanese, and all of them, or most of the Muslim people. So for the first impression was like, oh, they look all like me and my parents, so it's kind of feeling like home. But on the other hand, they started asking me, so who are you and what are you? And once I outed myself as a Jew, I very rapidly basically had to understand that I was not, at least by some part of them, I was not welcomed at all to their neighborhood, because it was not a multicultural neighborhood. It was a very Muslim dominated neighborhood. And if you're not part of this culture, then you might have a problem with some parts of them. And that's the story I wrote about, because my years as a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old teenager were heaven and hell at the same time, without even understanding what I'm going into. I had to very quickly understand what life could look like as a young Jew growing up amongst hundreds and thousands of Muslims in the Western world, without even being very much into religion and identity. I was very secular. I was very, open-minded. I just wanted to be a friend to my people in my neighborhood. I didn't care about colors and religion and ethnicity. But I was wrong when I, as a 13-year-old, thought that these things are part of Middle Ages, because many in this neighborhood, it was very important to them where you're from, where your parents are from, what the religion is. And so that's my story about, which the movie is based on.
Right. Well, there's a lot we could ask about your contemporary life in a second, but let's stay with the film for a minute and its reception. So to what degree, if you have, do you have a sense of, at least the film depicts some very warm friendships, even though there's lots of conflict, and the film depicts your exposure or outing, as you used, as a non-Muslim as late, as opposed to you're telling people early when you move from Spandau to Wedding. But what has been the response? Has there been response from your friends from those years? Have they seen it?
Yes, first of all, some of my friends, I would say half of the people around me and as a teenager were friends, and the other half were enemies. So the friend part, they are still friends with me. They hold the friendship with me, and it's usually Turks and Kurds, and they were like brothers to me all the time and today. And today I work for government in Israel, and I'm a reserve army spokesperson. I'm a major in the Israeli army. I was running around and giving even interviews in uniform. So they still kept the friendship with me, which says a lot. But the other half, which hated me back then just because I was Jewish, they kept on and keep on hating me today as well. They haven't changed that much. So the feedback, if I could say, concerning my book and my on the movie based on my past, is by some part of the Muslim community, which knew me and know me from before, and who are open-minded, I would say, who are aware of anti-Semitism amongst their own people. They are very happy about it, and they are saying good words about it, and say it's very important to, and do it in a way which is not, you could say all Muslims or all Arabs, but that would be wrong. And that's what they are grateful about, because once they see the movie or they read the book, they very quickly understand that here someone is writing, and the movie is showing a clear picture of both sides of a coin, the good side and the bad side, which is life about, and no matter where you look. Unfortunately, the say, the hate, the anti, I believe that they haven't learned too much. Some of the
You
reactions
know
I
what,
got.
Arye, I'm sorry, you bobbled out a little bit because of the internet. So just, I don't want people to miss what you said at the beginning of those sentences. So what you just, can you just repeat what you just said? About, I
Yes,
think,
so
people, the hostile, yeah.
You know, the good people back then, they are still good with me today, and they are very grateful about me talking about it and doing it in a very you know, in a very correct way, I would say. You know, not saying every Muslim, every Arab, every boy in wedding, but saying you had both sides of a coin, the good side, the bad side, and it basically shows that he's talking who understands what's really going on the ground. On the other side, you have the ones who are the haters, who were the haters back then, and they're still anti-Semites today. And from parts of them, I still receive to the very day messages over Messenger, Facebook Messenger, or Instagram, you know, still threatening me and my family, and still saying, you know, if I catch you in Berlin, I will do this and that to you and your family. So some of them don't very appreciate, I would say, that this movie was screened and that my book is on the market. But I believe that I'm doing a very, I feel like I'm doing a service to the Muslim people as well, because I'm doing it in a correct way, and they could learn from the story.
So I have a question. So you said you moved from Spandau to Wedding. What were your parents thinking when they moved? I mean, it's hard for a teenager to move anytime. In a big city like Berlin, you would think, you know, and with very good public transportation, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But we all know, anyone who lives in a big city knows that cities have very strong neighborhoods. Why did they make that move? And apparently they didn't appreciate fully what a shift it would be for you. What were they thinking, and when did they realize the kind of strains that you were under?
Well, first of all, I believe they were not thinking too much about something like that. And they had no clue what it's like to live in such a neighborhood in Berlin. You know, my parents, they were born in Iran. They are both Persian Jews. And in my book, I am talking also about my father went through in his little city called Babol. In the northern part of Iran when he grew up. So I'm talking about that as well. And when my father and my mother, when they moved to Germany in the beginning of the 70s, actually they didn't want to stay there. They actually planned on leaving to Canada. I was, and my sister was born. So they stood for about 40 years till they moved to Israel a couple of years ago. But my father, who left Iran in order to raise his family, his children, in a place which, from all places on earth, he chose Germany, which is funny in itself, I would even say. But he believed that Germany has changed. And, you know, you could claim that Germany has changed, and at least some parts of the Germans, they do have changed. But he had no clue that in the middle of Germany, in the middle of Berlin, you will have neighborhoods which are similar to where he was raised, Babel in Iran, then Germany, which is like the West, you know. He kicked me into a neighborhood which is similar to the place he grew up in Iran.
Yeah, amazing. I think that parents, well, you know, too, you know, you think you know sometimes, and you don't really, and I think you don't know the inner life of your teenage children as much as you try, because it's a time of separation developmentally. And how many young boys are going to come home and say, I'm completely, you know, in your case, I'm completely isolated, I'm subject to anti-Semitism, I don't fit in, why are we here? But still, it's remarkable to think, even just going from Spandau to Wedding, how different that was for you. I'm also curious, and I guess in many ways you've already said it, but we're showing other films, and we have a remarkable film, short film called Mazel Tov Cocktail, which if you haven't seen it, I absolutely recommend it. And it's by a Moldovan-born German Jew. And it's about his experience growing up in the community of former Soviet Jews in Berlin. But there's a huge community, 200,000 Jews from the former Soviet Union moved to Berlin and created their own very dynamic subculture, but quite distinct from the old survivor and German Jewish community. But, you know, I'm curious, when you were growing up, did you or your parents, I mean, I know you were Persian, but did you have any idea that there were institutions and organizations, there are Jewish communal, you know, forms in contemporary Germany? Was that part of your growing up or no?
Well, no, it was not part. My parents they were and they are still very secular, like they are not very much into religion. They didn't care about religion that much, you know, they're not into kosher food and Shabbat and all that. They didn't care. So I was raised basically as a, you know, let's say a German boy, Persian parents, being Jewish didn't have any meaning to me too much. I knew that I'm Jewish, but that was about it. And I would even claim that my Jewishness and my Zionism, which I have today, some part of it, or the main part of it, was basically woken up even by my surroundings, like by the people who fighted me for, in my view, for no reason, because I didn't do anything to them. So it's kind of a very strange reality, I would even say.
What's interesting is actually it's if we can talk about the form or sociological forms of Jewish identity, it's not that dissimilar to Jews from the Soviet Union. The difference is that there was a mass community, so there was an ethnic identity that was deeply felt, but had absolutely nothing to do with religion, right? Nothing to do with religion. But you were a singleton. Your family they were singletons in a community of Muslims. Sure. I mean, that's the incredible thing. So I have a question. In what language do you write?
Well, you know,
what language? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, there's just one thought which I wanted to share. You know, in the States, you have big Persian communities, Persian Jewish communities in Great Neck, for example, in New York or in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica and these places in Los Angeles. And so I have family there too. So, you know, the difference was that in Berlin, we were basically the only Persian Jews.
Yeah.
And so I fit too much because at home we were speaking Persian and Persian food and Persian carpets and Persian music. And so I didn't feel too much similarity with many of the Jews, which I didn't have any contact because my parents didn't have any contact. They didn't have a common language, I would even say. So later on, one of the main quotes from my book is that I didn't fit into any of the communities in Germany. Why? Because to the Germans, I was a foreigner. To the Muslims, I was a Jew. And to the Jews, I was a criminal boy from wedding, like a criminal boy, even a Muslim kind of boy. Mm-hmm. So sitting in all these chairs was a harsh reality for, you know, a teenager.
Yeah, sure, of course. I want to make one comment, and then actually you've prompted me to ask you a different question, which might be a little challenging. But when you think about the Persian Jewish community in the United States, you know, the United States defines Jews as a religion, and that has much to do with the history of the United States and the First Amendment, the foundational documents, and also the Cold War. And so I think it would be fascinating to compare Persian Jewish identity in different places. But in the United States, I have no doubt that what happens is a more religious identification over time, because that's the kind of difference that Americans understand, even if they don't understand Judaism, they understand religion. And Berlin's a very different place, and so is Paris, and secularity or laicite is much more common. So I have a question that you just described yourself as, people saw you as a criminal. You now live in Israel and you were a reserve officer, you're on the side of the state and authority. How has this affected your relationships with teenagers in Israel whose behavior may be, how shall we say, not as law-abiding as one might suggest, given your own past?
Yeah, I would say that because of anti-Semitism, I started to check how to survive my neighborhood, and in this neighborhood. So I kind of said to myself, and you have to understand, I was 13, 14, 15. I said, if you can't beat them, you have to join them. That's more or less what I understood as a young boy. So I joined them. And when I mean them, I mean the Muslim community. And back then in the 90s, and it's not that different today. I just been to Berlin 2 weeks ago. The gangs were ruling the streets. So and the gangs were criminal, and they were aggressive boys, and they were all armed with knives and weapons. And so I was, when thinking back about myself, though, it was the age of 16 in Berlin in the mid-90s. I was walking in the streets of Berlin like I'm in the middle of a war. There was absolutely actually no reason for it, but that's what the young Muslim guys in this neighborhood were like, and I was one of them basically. So I also, once you start hanging out with these guys in order to be protected as well, you do what they do, and some part of them, they are criminals. So I started being criminal as well. I started to be a graffiti sprayer, for example. I did lots of graffiti, and I was basically the founder of the biggest graffiti crew in Berlin called Berlin Crime back in the 90s. And so I would say, looking back, I know the other part of I don't know if you could say the bad guys, but criminals and these sort of people. And today, 25 years later, working for government and being in uniform in the army and basically representing the state, I see that many people working with me, they have no clue what the other part of the people, like the criminal people, why they are criminals sometimes. And sometimes they might have reasons like I had. It's not that you're born, usually you're not born criminal. But sometimes being raised in bad neighborhoods, maybe you don't have a way out there, and one thing leads to the other.
It would be interesting. It would be interesting.
Which was published about 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just 2 more sentences. I published a brand new book about 2-3 weeks ago, which is called 100 Wisdoms. It's in German as well. And in this book, I basically try to make youngsters growing up in these kind of neighborhoods, which are problematic. I try to make them understand that they have a way out from there, just like I had. And I try to help them with 100 wisdoms, how to manage their life and believe that there is a day after these bad days living in such neighborhoods.
Yeah, I was going to say, it would be great, and maybe I'm sure it will happen, that your film, when it gets shown in Israel, it would be, I'm sure all the social workers and people who are working with, kids from difficult neighborhoods, of which there are many in Israel, for them to see the transition of your life. True. As a young man, an angry, justifiably angry young man, but an angry young man who had really no choice but to join. Yeah. I mean, your life was at stake, and also your psychological health was at stake. So it made sense. It made sense. I'm actually curious. I mean, you just described that you wrote another book. But what about your art? Are you involved with visual art anymore?
Yeah, if you would have asked me with the age of 18 or 19, I would have said I will do graffiti all my life, but when I moved to Israel and I needed to start my life from almost zero, new language, new people, again, army, again, university from zero. It was I would say, tough times to manage and to survive in Israel as well. But now I succeeded to manage and be okay today, having raised a little family as well and having my income and, writing books. I'm having fun. So graffiti today is not that central like back then. But my little kids, I have a 9-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl, Raphael and Michelle. Sometimes we sit around the table and I start drawing little pictures and their names with different colors, and they like it very much. And I even had the chance to once go to the kindergarten about 2 years ago of my little girl and give the little girls and boys a graffiti lesson, and they liked it very much.
Yeah, sure. So when you were growing up, this is a question from one of our viewers. When you were growing up in Germany in the very unique environments that you described, how aware were you of Germany's long, well, not so long, the recent past, the mid 20th century, with the horror and the Shoah, the Holocaust, and Germany's relationship to its Jewish population? How much was that part of your consciousness growing up?
Not at all. The very strange thing is, and I write in my book, I'm telling about in 6th grade, I was going to some sort of exhibition about Anne Frank, and I was going there with my friends from my class, and it was a hot summer day, and I was walking through the exhibition. It was very boring to me, and I saw this girl with that yellow Magen David on her chest, and I didn't really understand that it has something to do with myself as well. So I was in 6th grade. I was about, maybe 10 years old or something. And me and 2 friends of mine, one German and one Turkish, we were kind of bored. So we said, let's go and play soccer outside instead of hanging out in this exhibition. Just a few years later, I understood that Anne Frank is basically me, and that I didn't understand that how close to my own, to my own identity Anne Frank is.
Right. So, I did start by asking you about the adaptation from your memoir, and I want to just tell the audience that Wet Dog is a shortened version. The full title is A Wet Dog is Better Than a Dry Jew. So it's a very harsh expression of anti-Jewish sentiment and hatred. But for film reasons and for good reasons, they called it Wet Dog. I think that was a very smart move. But because there was an adaptation, many people want to know to what degree you had a sweetheart back in the day in Wedding. Or was that added? And I know you mentioned that the last part.
Like, you mean
true.
girlfriend?
Selma. Yeah, your girlfriend. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So the main characters in the movie are 3 characters. One is myself, the guy playing me. Then there is my best friend and my girlfriend. But in real life and in my book, the girl is basically 2 persons. There were 2 girls, and the boy are basically 3 persons, like 3 characters. Since you asked me about the girl, I will answer concerning the girl. So I was, with the age of 16, I was in love with a young Turkish girl. Her name was close to Selma, very close, and her name was Selda. And she was a classmate of mine, and she liked me and I liked her, But one day, we were sitting beside each other. She started crying, and I said, "What's going on with you?" And she said, we don't have a future together. I said, what you mean? She said, you know, you're Jewish, I'm Muslim, we can't, you know, be together. I said, what are you talking about? Why not? And then she said, because, you know, one day we will grow up, and once we start to talk about being married, you will say, you can't be with me, and you will kick me. And I said, why do you think like that? And she said, because she believes that that's probably going to happen. And she for herself would love to marry a Muslim guy who's closer to her culture and her religion. So that was the age of 16, which was very weird to me. So that was Zelda. But after that, I fell in love with a Croatian girl called Janica in my book. Her name is close to Janica as well. And I was with her for, we went out for 6 years. And in the movie, you don't see Janica. You only see the Turkish girl who was before Janica. And that has a reason, because the film director said, if you come up with too many characters, people get confused, you know. I mean, the story is about the life of a Jew amongst Muslims. And if you come up with the Croatian girl, people get confused. So Janica, unfortunately, was not part of the movie, but she is very, very central in the book.
Great, thank you. So let me see what else, what other questions we have. This is going to sound like a punting kind of question, but I'm, you know, now that you are so aware of the history of European Jewry or of Ashkenazic Jewry and anti-Semitism so embedded, I mean, how has that shaped you? You know, I mean, it's one thing when you didn't know, you're sort of walking through your life, but now you know, and now you're an Israeli, right? And there's all these trips to Germany, and I don't need to tell you the March of the Lip, you know, all these trips so Israeli youth will know what happened there.
Yeah.
So how does your own Germanness, and you write in German, you know, that's a very intimate thing, writing in a language. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I have a kind of love-hate relationship to Germany, to the Germans, and even to the migrant community in Germany. It's a love-hate relationship because of everything I went through my years as a teenager, you know, and also because of everything which happened back then and is happening even today in Germany. So it's like when I say love hate, I'm saying that on the one hand, there's a lot of things which can't stand looking at born which is Germany. And on the other hand, I have many friends there. I know many good people there, and that's my first language. I write in German. I even, you know, you could even claim I dream in German. Probably, I'm not even sure about it, but you know, maybe it's Persian. But anyway, so there's so many links which connect me to Germany and the German language. So that's love hate about, and so it's like, you know, all of us have been to relationships with partners, and we know how close love and hate sometimes can be with a person. So that's my feeling with country and its people.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So on a personal note, your siblings and your parents came after you to Israel. So just, I'm curious, did your siblings, once your life experience was so apparent to your parents, did that inform the way they reared your younger brother and sister, and you know, or did they stay in Wedding? What happens there in your family?
Yeah, my sister is 5 years younger than me, and my brother is 7 years younger than me. And my brother went through similar stuff I went through, sometimes even harder than myself. I remember that my brother in 9th grade, he had to wait in the office of the director of his school because outside of school, there were about 10, 15 young Arabs waiting with knives to, to fight him. So he couldn't go out of school after school. He had to wait that police comes and makes sure that no one is hurting him. Really hard reality, I have to say. But my parents basically had, again, they didn't have that much of a clue because on the one, I didn't tell them. Many of the things I went through, I didn't tell them. And the only times they understood that something is going wrong was if I came home and I was bleeding because I went through night, or when the police knocked on our door because I did something wrong, like graffiti and these things, and I was caught. But the very first time my parents understood that what my life was about, growing up in their home, but on the streets of Berlin, was when they read my memoir. That was the very first time they got a full picture of their son's life. And my mother was crying for hours, she said,
Yeah,
for hours. Yeah. She said, how weird it is that I didn't know about my own son's life, even though he was living with me in the same house. But I didn't want to make them, first of all, I thought that they can't really help me, this reality, on the one hand. On the other hand, I felt that I don't want them to be scared and to be frightened, but I tried to deal myself with the reality. And I had part of the help I got was from, on the one hand, my Croatian girlfriend, and on the other hand, parts of the Muslim community who were close to myself and friends of mine and helped me and protected me. And so they were the ones I kind of cried and spoke to and tried to get advice from.
I think it's very difficult as a parent. I think I feel for your mother. I'm sure you do as a father too. You know, there are things you don't know about your children, and you may not know, and they know because you're a writer and you have the need. Can we expect an English translation of your book?
Well, I hope so. I very much hope so, and not only English. I hope for a Hebrew version and a French version and a Dutch version and an Italian and French, because in the end, Berlin is Paris, is Roma, is Rotterdam, is Malmö, is London, and might also be some parts of the States. I mean, the Jewish community in the States is a very different story, but we are all aware, unfortunately, that even in some parts of the US, Jews are not that safe like they used to be, and that some parts of the American people and some parts of the migrant community in the States as well, they attacked Jews even this May. I remember in California and another part in New York, I think. So so even in the States, things are not 100% safe. And so I think that this story is a story which is a story of the world, of the West world, especially Europe, but also of the States. And it's a story of identity as well. You know, of identity. It's a story of the big city. It's a story of different ethnicities and religions and living together in, let's say, multiculturalism and going through a teenagehood and trying to find yourself on this earth. And that's why I think that it should be translated. I have no idea if it will happen in the end, but I'm hoping and maybe even praying for it.
I would imagine, I have to say, it seems to me eminently translatable. And I think there'd be a wide audience in the places you mentioned. In terms of the issues of the way anti-Jewish hatred or Judeophobia or anti-Semitism plays out in different locales. That's a very big story, but it is, I mean, in many ways, it's I guess what a Romana Clef, it's really a story, at least the way I saw the movie, as an adolescent, you know, what it's like to be an adolescent and the social and the pressures of wanting to belong, which every adolescent feels. And if you're in a neighborhood where belonging means jumping over turnstiles and doing graffiti art, as you said, you're going to join. You are going to join. And, you know, there's all kinds of adolescents who pass into either criminality or this, that, the other thing, and yet you emerged. And I think that's the happy ending, if you will. At the time, do you think your peers and yourself had any awareness of the global issues that you were sort of mirroring, or was it just you were in vetting as teenagers?
Yeah, you know, I thought it's my story and it's a wedding story, and it is a wedding story and it is my story. But at the end, if you do the zoom out, you understand that similar stories can everywhere not be a Jew amongst Muslims. It could be a white guy amongst hundreds of blacks, or a one black amongst hundreds of whites, or a Hispanic, you know, talking about the States. Or if you look at, you know, let's look at France. So you have lots of Moroccans, for example, one white amongst Moroccans. Or in London, you have Pakistanis and whites and Pakistanis. And so it's a thing of, I think that it's my story, if you look at it in a micro way, but if you do the zoom out and you think macro, it's a story about many places on earth, and it's about colors, and it's about religions, and it's about different ethnicities and languages. And I think that we have all of us, we know about what I'm talking here, and some of us know because we lived in these parts, might have contact to these parts on the globe, and some of us were probably fortunately not raised in bad neighborhoods where things can very quickly deteriorate, and see these realities only on the movie screen. So it's very important if you want to understand, I would say, the big city of today. And again, it's not only Berlin, it's Paris, it's London, it's other places. You have to be aware of these neighborhoods as well. If you look at, I give you an example, if you look at Rio de Janeiro, it's not only that you have the Copacabana, you have the favelas as well. So on the one hand, you have the good neighborhood, on the other hand, you have the bad neighborhood, and it's all part of one city. And I was born and I was basically raised, at least with the age of 13, I moved to the bad part, especially as a Jew. But it taught me a lot. I'm looking back today, I'm very happy about my years as a teenager in this kind of survival camp, because it taught me many, many lessons about life, about people, about religions, about myself, and about who I want to be and where I want to go. And that sometimes people, unfortunately, becoming criminal or becoming even radical in their religious worldview, you know, sometimes I even understand why they deteriorate. And that people who live in better neighborhoods and have, let's say, more financial might, they should look into these neighborhoods and see how to help these people, reach out to them. Some of them are, because of hopelessness, they can become very dangerous, not only to people living in their neighborhood, but outside of the neighborhood as well.
I think you're right. I think what's amazing is that despite all the conversation of, you know, Tom Friedman, the world is flat, and communications and Facebook, you know, all this stuff, that in fact, people still live in communities, and the communities in which they live are very different. It's socioeconomic, it's ethnic, it's religious. And in big urban centers, there are so many different communities, and you and I talked about this a little bit, that it wasn't a multicultural neighborhood that you grew up in. You grew up in a Muslim neighborhood. It wasn't as if people got up in the morning and said, oh, my neighbor's different from me, and I think that's just great. And I think that there's sometimes a misperception. People can live together, but sometimes it's just pragmatic. And sometimes they don't live together very well. And I think your life history, your story, and then the film shows both elements, because you did have teenage love affairs, which speaks to the peoples were able to connect across difference. But there was also the reality of the violence that you were faced, and it sounds like your younger brother faced as well. So Arye, is there anything you would like to tell our audience that we haven't touched on? You get the last word.
Yes, first of all, Nancy, and to everybody here, I'm very, very thankful that that my movie, it's not my movie, but it's the movie based on or inspired by my book and my memoirs. I'm very grateful, and I'm very thankful, and I'm very proud, I would even say, that you're watching it and you're even discussing it with yourselves and with myself. And it's a big satisfaction. I'm going, it's 2 a.m. here in Israel, and I'm almost 2. So I'm going to go to bed, and I will be going to bed very happily. And I hope that the movie, and maybe even whoever reads German, maybe it will be translated into English, and you can have a copy in English and enjoy it. I hope it will, it will enrich your knowledge as well, because I believe that, in world, and here I'm very similar to Friedman in terms of how I understand world is, I'm not the theoretical kind of guy. I'm more the practical kind of. I try to understand what's going on in real life, what's going on the ground, and meeting people and smelling people and touching people and different peoples in different places, and that's basically the real thing on earth, to understand what earth and what we people are all about. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the movie, and hopefully soon the book in English.
Thank you, Talal Laila Tov. Get a good rest, and to our audience, please join us for the rest of the festival. Tonight is opening night. You have, I hope you have passes for all the films, and that you will tune into the webinars and the book chats. Everything is on the website. If you have questions, you can ask through the website, not through the office, please. And I want to thank you, Arye Shalicar, for an extraordinary memoir, which was adapted into an extraordinary movie, and you've enlightened all of us. Good night, everyone. Stay safe. See you soon at other webinars.